Okay, part three of the Respondent. This is a much more substantial chapter, probably a lot more useful, though some red flags at the end, which I will wait till the end of this video to talk about. So he expresses some frustration that the doctor, I guess, that he met with at the mental health institution was not the regular doctor. That he was told there were, I guess, budget cuts, and for that reason, he was going to have to wait an additional 3 days. I guess he was speaking from Friday, and he was going to have to wait till Monday or something like that. Um, so he is just appalled that the reason why he has to suffer any longer is because of bureaucracy. He specifically calls out Sacramento, which is the capital of California. He talks about participating in group therapy. He talks about chatting with patients. He talks about how visiting hour came around and he expected his wife to come and visit him, and she didn't. Instead, he got a phone call, and the phone call, he specifically describes her voice as robotic, and he says that she has no empathy. Now, this is something that I believe I've picked up on in prior chapters, but he really drives home in this chapter that his wife has no empathy, that he feels like it's an unspeakable betrayal. And I see him really trying to drive home this contrast of empathy between both him and his wife, where he has a tremendous amount of empathy, almost too much, and she has none, and she's cold and callous. And I'm noticing that. Again, that's not a red flag, but that is a yellow flag. He talks about his past here, and this gives me some insight as to if he was telling the truth, which I don't know if he is or isn't yet. If he was telling the truth, the insight that I get from his past would confirm how he ended up with a callous, manipulative, abusive ex-wife. Again, it would just make me believe and understand how it ended up happening. Who knows if it's actually true? At this point, I don't want to sound like I've already decided. I'm just letting you guys know at part three, these are my thoughts. These thoughts can change very quickly. He talks about how when he was a kid, he used to sleep with a knife under his pillow, and that he had a bedwetting issue, and that his parents had a volatile relationship. It's a little bit of a surprise because he's gone so far in life, which is totally fine. That can happen. You would think that he had a good childhood and a good upbringing, but he says that he didn't. I feel like I really didn't have the best one either, but I certainly wasn't sleeping with a knife under my pillow. So if he was sleeping with a knife under his pillow, that is scary. It makes me feel like he thought he had to defend himself, which, I mean, maybe he'll talk more about that, but that is definitely scary. He talks about how he did get to meet his wife and his, I guess, his mother-in-law too. I don't think so. I think his wife just comes on day two. So on day one, he just gets a phone call. On day two, he gets to meet his wife. He talks about how she was, again, cold and callous. Her tone was flat. She had no empathy. And he says that she demanded access to the financials. What I'm talking about is passwords and stuff like that. And here he goes again. And he says, for a reason that he can't explain, he signed everything. What do I mean by signing? Apparently, there were other documents besides the financials, like the passwords and usernames. He had to sign some other documentation. Um, I wish I could remember what it was. It doesn't matter because I'm sure that it's going to come up in the litigation. This is the second time he's talked about signing something without reading it. Um, I just don't buy it. We're talking about a very wealthy individual. I just don't buy that this is the type of person who wouldn't carefully read things like this, especially when he's been incarcerated, or let's just say institutionalized. And one of the red flags is, why didn't he hire a lawyer immediately? Um, he might not have been able to, I guess. I find that to be suspicious. He might have not been able to make calls. Very, very suspicious to me. But I guess it's possible. If you're in a jail, you have access to a lawyer. If you're in a mental health institution, maybe you don't. I don't know. And I guess if he had a malevolent ex, she would not do that. I guess, I mean, I'm having to fill in a lot of blanks. I really wish he would have talked about this because wealthy people have access to lawyers. They just do. Not only do they have access to lawyers, but a lot of times they have a friend or two that's a lawyer. Um, so that to me is the first red flag. He talks about how he was vulnerable and susceptible to manipulation. I'm having a hard time with this one, guys. I just am. He talks about how his wife, I guess, kept telling him to take medication, and he felt like if he would have taken psychotropic medications to appease her, she would have helped him get out of there. And so he went up, I guess, to the medicine counter in the mental health place, and he started demanding medication. And the nurse was like, "You're not supposed to have any. You're not on this list." And then he talks about politics in the sense of the opioid epidemic and how people can get opioids, but he can't get mental health stuff, even though he's in an institution. This is so bizarre. Um, I mean, guys, I went through this myself with my ex. I didn't get to go into a mental health institution, but this is just a really, really far-fetched idea. Here's what my brain thinks. I get suspicious, and I think allegations came up during the child custody case, and that this person had to cook up some kind of plausible explanation as to why he was trying to get access to medicine that he shouldn't have had. It makes me suspicious. I'm sorry if people don't like that. I'm just being honest with where I'm at. Chapter 3 is not good for the author. He's definitely, my opinion is definitely at the moment going into the zone of him being the high conflict person at this point. Being really honest with you guys. That could change later, but for now, that's where I'm at. He talks about how, let's see here, going through my notes. He's just, okay, so yeah, he finally, okay, the next day comes, and I guess it's Monday, and he gets to talk to the actual doctor, who he says he was promised. I don't like that he uses that word. I mean, a lot of the a lot of the remarks that I'm hearing from this individual remind me of my ex. So that's why I'm like, alarm bells are going off. I'm hearing a lot of this stuff that she used to say. In any event, he talks about how people were promising him that he was going to get out when this other doctor came in. This other doctor comes in, and he talks about this a lot. He doesn't just say it once or twice. The other doctor shows up and says, "Hey, I talked to your wife, and I talked to your mother-in-law, and based on what these two people told me, I'm going to keep you here for an additional 11 days." So what he's trying to say is now he knows for sure, once and for all, that his wife is doing everything in her power to keep him in the institution. And that's what he wants to convey to the reader. But I'm picking up on this person almost trying to explain away why he made so many mistakes. And I'm just getting I'm naive, I'm a weak person, I'm pathetic, I'm playing dumb, and it's not, I don't think, very useful in the sense of high conflict child custody litigation, and it doesn't make me think that this guy's on the up and up at this point. Let's keep going. Again, guys, chapter 3 is pretty brutal for the author as far as my opinion goes. He talks about how he can't believe that his ex believes that the best thing for the family is for him to suffer. Again, I've heard that before. He talks about his sadistic mother-in-law. Okay, there's another meeting. This is the next day, and the mother-in-law shows up with his wife, and he says that she's sadistic because she tells him these things that he feels could have only been to hurt him. She tells him that he's been banned from the kid's school, that he's been suspended from the country club, that that she wanted him to sign. I guess there was some kind of signatures that were needed to get access to the money. And then he talks about how all it took was a 10-word lie for him to end up in the situation that he's in, and kind of insinuating that it was all engineered, which is possible. I'm not saying that never happens. I'm just saying that from what I am reading, I'm not convinced. Now, we're going to go through child custody stuff. There's probably going to be discussion on the trials and the hearings and all that. I'm sure that he's going to talk about that. If he doesn't talk about that, then the book is garbage. He's going to have to talk about litigation, the attorneys, and the judge. He's going to have to get to that point at some point. I really hope that it happens. And once it does happen, we'll see. We'll see what what happened in the system, what happened in court. We'll see what the outcome was. Um, so now he goes into his journal. And my suspicion, again, immediate suspicion, is that the journal gets brought up in the litigation. I feel like he's almost preparing everybody for what's going to happen, to sort of justify the outcome. That's my gut at this point. But I don't know yet. He does talk about the journal. He talks about how there was an entry in there about who he was acknowledging that he had problems that needed fixing, that he understood he was broken internally, that he understood that he needed to confront the abuse that he suffered at the hand of his parents. Um, all of these things are I remember my ex having these issues as well and disclosing these things to me. And it's true. You could suffer abuse and end up having to get through it and becoming a better person. You could also suffer abuse and end up with a personality disorder. Either one could happen. And it's sad that some people end up, what do they call it? Hurt people hurt people. That's what they say. It's a saying, right? If you're a hurt person, you will hurt other people. Other people will get hurt and they will say, I'm never going to do anything like that again. So just because he goes through the journal doesn't mean that I automatically believe what he's saying. Especially since the next phrase is that he doesn't consider himself to be the hero of the story, and that he admits to destroying trust in the marriage. He doesn't explain how he destroyed the trust. He's just explaining that in the general vague sense he has. Maybe this will come out later. We'll see. But yes, as I said earlier in this video, if you have had these sorts of issues in your past, it does create a sort of plausible explanation as to how you ended up with an abusive ex. It's possible with that kind of past that he would not have been good at choosing a life partner, and that he would have chosen somebody who exploited him. It's possible. Not at that point. I'm just saying that the fact that he's telling us about his past and his child, the abuse he suffered, and the neglect, that I can understand how that happened. This is the last thing I'm going to talk about, and this is one of the bigger red flags. He was telling his ex to bring psychology books. And he says the reason why is because the doctor told him to. This is really vivid. It brings a really vivid memory back to me for when my ex was in the mental health institution. And this is in the My Docket series. I've already talked about it. It came out in the findings and all that stuff. When she was there, she asked me to bring copies of the law. And I guess she wanted to be able to use the law to show it to people and get out. Now, my suspicion as to him wanting psychology books is that he wanted to read the books and do the job of the psychologist better, or read the books and figure out how to manipulate the psychologist. That's just my suspicion, because when my ex was at the mental health institution, she asked me for inappropriate documentation as well. I don't know what to tell you guys. It did not come across the right way to me. He says in his book that the fact that she did not bring those books was another betrayal, because he needed those. And again, he says the doctor told him to get those, which I find so difficult to believe. I don't understand why a psychologist would tell a patient to get his ex to bring psychologist books to him. I don't understand that. That sounds really weird. Now, he doesn't say that his ex didn't come, because she did. She showed up, and she did bring him something to read. She brought him, I guess, I forgot now, it was another book. It was obviously not psychology books. She brought him some other book to read, and then she brought him a script from a literary agent. Now, I don't really understand what that is, but he seemed to say that that is the script that saved him, and I don't know why. The only thing that I can guess is he was either using the papers to communicate, like to send a message, or maybe there was some information in that script where he could call the agent and get out. He sort of implies that this was his escape hatch. Not that he was actually interested in the script, but that he used it for other purposes. But yeah, I mean, if his wife was diabolical. She could have just ignored him. She didn't have to go. She didn't have to bring him anything. She brought him something. She just didn't bring him what he wanted. And I've talked about this in the My Docket series. You guys, if you've watched the My Docket series, you'll probably remember me having said this. When I showed up to the mental health institution with those papers my ex asked for, it was basically a printout of the Nevada Revised Statutes. This is a chapter she wanted me to print out. When I showed up with those papers and I sat down at the bench with her and her mental health, whatever, counselors, like I don't know who the heck it was. The psychologist, counselor, whoever it was, said, "What are those?" And I handed her these, and I said, "My ex, or I don't know, Monica told me to bring her these." And she looked at them and she screamed at my ex. She was like, "You asked him to bring these here?" I remember that was, she just got chewed out. And I don't know what to tell you guys. I just, definitely a big red flag at the end of chapter 3 for me. I'm still open-minded. My opinion could still change, but just want to be honest right now with what I feel at this point in the process. If you have any questions, feel free to post them down in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time.